First, they intended that the children of tribal Indians who resided on reservations and owed their direct allegiance to their tribes would not be entitled to birthright citizenship, but the children of assimilated Indians who had left their reservations and had established permanent residence among the body politic of the states would be entitled to birthright citizenship.
By the end of this video, we will definitively conclude who, in fact, is the indigenous and who is native. They are absolutely two different people, two different classes. And we have been debating about who is native because we have already identified ourselves as indigenous. These natives, who they are, have used this argument to run us around in circles. So by the time we come to the conclusion of this video, we will be able to definitively conclude who is indigenous and who is native. We will be able to draw these conclusions based off of acts of Congress and the current birthright citizenship argument that is being held by Congress and the Supreme Court currently. In my book, Paper Genocide, which first I want to thank you all for your support. The copies have been sold out and they will be back in stock on June 2nd. In this book, I talk about the colonial doctrine of prodigious birth. And this is something that you need to look up. I won't go into great detail, but prodigious birth is, or the colonial doctrine of prodigious birth is how they changed the indigenous people from their nature, from who they were, to being what is considered a legal monster. Because prodigious birth actually ties to that term, monster. In law, if you look up prodigious birth and monster, they mean the exact same thing. So you will find that in Congress, they will use a legalese term that identifies the same thing. They use the term assimilated, an assimilated Indian, right? Which from their terms, an assimilated Indian is one who has left the reservation and has joined with the populace of the United States, or has joined to the United States government, which is through the 14th Amendment citizenship, right? See, it's through this assimilation that they have disqualified us as being the indigenous and being something totally different. That's how they qualify considering us Negroes, coloreds, blacks, mulattoes, African Americans. That's the reason why they can keep moving the ball, is because we have assimilated. We have joined with them and have agreed and become subject to the jurisdiction thereof, or the precedent that they are attempting to establish is under this subject to the jurisdiction thereof. We became subject to the jurisdiction thereof through assimilation. To prove this case, I'm going to refer to a hearing from February of this year where a professor, two DC lawyers, and a prior immigration judge were sworn in and before Congress and had this conversation dealing with birthright citizenship. Though One was Democrat, and clearly the other three were more Republican minded. They were all clear on who the Indians were in this 14th Amendment that had been ratified, that stemmed from the 1866 Civil Rights Act. See, we have been led to believe that the Trail of Tears or the um, Indian Removal Act of 1830 was just like they just grouped all the Indians together and just moved them all collectively. But that's not exactly what happened. For instance, the Choctaw removal was from 1830 to 1833. The Creek removal was from 1832 to 1836. The Cherokee removal was from 1838 to 1839. So these are all different times, different removals, different trails of tears. Okay. Chickasaw was in 1837. And the Seminoles, which was their hardest removal, lasted from 1816 to 1858 because that's how long the Seminole Wars lasted, over 40 years. Through this removal, all Indians that did not decide to be removed, like the Seminoles who fought to the end, instead of removing them, they just reclassified them. Again, I'm going back to this doctrine of prodigious birth. Since they couldn't kill them all, they couldn't unalive them all through war, those who they didn't get to move through the Trail of Tears, they just reclassified. So now they're changing the nature of the people, or going to that legal term that they use, or is that actually is a legalese term that they use, called assimilation. So now they're suggesting that those that did not go through the Trail of Tears are now assimilated into the body politic of the United States government and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That's how they changed the nature of the people just by the stroke of the pen, by changing them from their indigenous names to being Negroes, coloreds, mulatto, black, now African American. The conclusion of the Seminole Wars was in 1858. From 1861 to 1865, we have the Civil War, right? Immediately following the Civil War, 1865, you got 1866 is where they established the very first Civil Rights Act. In the current debate, they are referring to the indigenous or the Indians. They're saying that this 14th Amendment was for the Indians who lived on the reservation, who were not subject to, who still had loyalty to the United States, but weren't subject to the law because they had their own tribal law. And the second class was those who assimilated, or those who they absorbed into the United States government. I'm going to show you proof because this is what they've already concluded. This is what the scholars, this is what the lawyers, the immigration judges have already concluded. Those who were on the reservations and those who had assimilated. That assimilation refers to the colonial doctrine of prodigious birth, which makes whoever they're applying this to a legal monster. And you can find nearly all of these facts that I'm speaking of right here in this book, Paper Genocide, the legal erasure of indigenous people. Paper Genocide will be back in stock on June 2nd. So without further ado, let's take a look at this clip from the congressional hearing on birthright citizenship.
The history of the clause. The clause was framed by the 39th Congress to constitutionalize the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which had been passed by that same Congress just 2 months earlier. The 1866 Act explicitly denied birthright citizenship to persons, quote, subject to any foreign power, close quote, and to, quote, Indians not taxed, close quote. It is clear from the debate in the 39th Congress that Congress decided to replace this language with subject to the jurisdiction thereof, not because Congress suddenly and without any comment decided to broaden the scope of birthright citizenship from the act. Rather, Congress was concerned that the phrase Indians not taxed language generated uncertainty about the citizenship status of the children of Indians, primarily rich and poor Indians. First, they intended that the children of tribal Indians who resided on reservations and owed their direct allegiance to their tribes would not be entitled to birthright citizenship, but the children of assimilated Indians who had left their reservations and had established permanent residence among the body politic of the states would be entitled to birthright citizenship.
And so, to further show you that we're dealing with two different types of Indians, the indigenous Indians and later the native Indians, we can look to the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924 that was signed into law on June 2nd, 1924, which is actually called the Snyder Act, that granted citizenship to Native Americans. So the Native Americans did not become citizens until 1924. And clearly, according to Congress, the lawyers and the scholars, the 1866 Civil Rights Act, which brought forth the 14th Amendment in 1868, referred to two different types of Indians. There was an indigenous Indian that they fought against and that they put on the Trail of Tears, and those who didn't go on the trail assimilated, they absorbed into the system. Those are the Indians that we're claiming to be.